today we are going to talk about positioning in grid and how to position grid items within a grid container. So this is my HTML. I have just a container and a div with the ID of pink box, and then I have these styles. So my result HTML will look like this. So this example was taken from Cold Steel Grid course, and you can check that out. I have linked that course in my description. So now if we see that this grid item start from column 1, if I go and open my grid dev tools, which will come very handy, layout, and then this. So this grid item starts from grid column 1 and ends at grid column 2, start at grid row 1 and at grid row 2. But if I want this grid item to start from grid column 3, like I just want to move it here, what can I do? So in order to do that, we have to go and on that particular item I have given ID of pink box. So what will I do? I will say that grid column start. And what will grid column start will take? It will take from where you have to start the column. So we have to start the column from 3. So if I go now, the item moves to the starting point of 3, and just because it has taken one FR, so it will end at 4. Now if I want to move it from here to here, so now if you see that it's grid row 3 and grid row 4. So now what I can do, I can say that grid row start 3. Okay, so it will be moved here. Now suppose if I want to span that element, like I want that this item should take 2 or 3 item spaces. So what can I do? If suppose I want to tell this grid item to span 2 columns here and 2 rows here, so what can I do here? That the starting point is 2. If I talk about column, the starting point is 2 and the ending point is 4. So here we have given the starting point 2, and now we have a property called grid column and it will be 4. So now if you see that it's span 2 columns. Similarly with the row, if I said that the grid row start is 3 and end at 5. So I want to go and set that grid row and 5. So now the grid item spans for 2 rows and 2 columns. So this is how you can position a grid item within a grid container using the grid lines. Now I want to show you how grid behaves when there are multiple items within a grid container. Before that, the example was that there was just one item within a grid container, so we can move it from anywhere to anywhere. But now we have 4 items within a grid container, and I have given ID to each item. Styles are just simple: height, width, and 4 columns and 1 row. I have explicitly defined 1 row, and I will show you that why I have defined it. So my normal structure is this. Now I just want to move this one to here. Now what will happen? This space will be blank. So either the 4 will move here or where. Like it's just a question. Like just this, if I move this grid column, this whole item to here, the 2 will move here, the 3 will move here, but where will the 4th item go? So if I go and set that one grid row start 2, sorry, grid column start 2. Now you have seen that 1, 2 and 3, but the 4th item moves here. Now that's a weird behavior now, because I have said that I want 1 row of 1 FR. So how it creates a new row? Like if I remove this 1 row, now the structure, like what is happening here? So let me tell you what happened. Like when I told in that I want 1 row, so it creates a row of 1 FR, but the 4th item have to be moved somewhere, so it creates an implicit row. This row is not explicit. Explicit rows are those rows which we have defined explicitly. Now this is an implicit row, and it creates an implicit row, and when there will be a 5th item, it will be here. This row is not defined by us, But when we remove those grid template raw, so by default, if I remove this also, there are one row, but this row is not defined by us. This is an implicit row. We have defined 4 columns and 4 columns grid, 4 columns grid. So it, the columns are explicit but the rows are implicit. So when I said that grid column start 2, so it creates a new row just because it's an implicit row. It knows that this row was not defined by user, so the grid container can make as much rows as it wants in order to contain the item within a container. Now we will see how to name those grid lines. Initially, when we saw that in our layout section, if you go there, there was there were line numbers here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2. These were raw lines and these were column lines. And at that time, I said you that we can name those lines. Now, first of all, I don't use this trick. Like, it's an head-on for me. There are multiple reasons. The one reason is that we can't use then repeat if I want. Like, if I want to name those lines, how we can do that? We do that like I have one FR, one FR, one FR, and one FR. Okay. So if I go here, it's all the same. Now, if I want to name those lines, what I will do, I will go and say that main content start. I can name whatever we want, but it should be in a, or I can do is 1, 2, and 3, so it will be easy for us. 1, okay. Then here is 2, okay. There is 3, and there is 4, okay. Now if I go, everything is same, but now these have these lines have name also. Even if I go and set that grid column start and I want to just see that, now I can position my item within a grid using the line number or the line name which we have defined here. The key thing is that when you are giving the name to a particular column, we have to use square brackets, and when we are using that name, we don't have to use square brackets. I don't use it particularly just because I use grid template area, which we will cover next. One thing more, that when we are using this grid dev tool, uh, by default we have those hide lines. We can use multiple options from here. So by default we were using this show line number, but if we go and select show line names, it will show us the line name we have declared here: 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now we're going to talk about grid template area. uh, in my initial HTML, I have header, nav, main, and header, nav, article, ads, footer boxes, and I have given those basic styles here. So my resulting HTML is like that. Now these extras were also taken from code steel grid codes, and I will link that in description also. And basically in that exercise we have to create this. Now we have learned the basics of grid, and we know that we can make this out of positioning the element within the grid. We can span the element, but now what we can do, we can set the, actually we can set the territory. How we can set the territory is that we can say that within a container we can say that these columns and these rows are assigned to this particular member, and then we can give an item that member name, and basically it will span and it will move to that particular territory which we have defined for that item. In order to make that contain, in order to use the grid template area, what we have to do is that in our main container we can see that there are 5 columns and 4 rows, which we can also see here. We have 5 columns and 4 rows. Now I know that my header spans from the column 1 till the last column, and I don't have to actually remember the column number here. So I can see that my header starts from here and ends here. So what I can do is that I can go and I can say that grid template areas, and in that what we have to do, we have to apply a string, and what we will say that header, we can name it whatever we want. I can name it head or anything else. Just I am marking the territory that the first 4 columns, you can see that I have 5 columns. So I have defined 5 columns here. So the first I what I am saying that the top column, the first row and all the 5 columns belongs to the header, as we can see here. Now what we can see, in the second row, the first column belongs to navbar. So now we have to create a new string, and I'm saying that the first column belongs to nav. Now the second belongs to article, the third belongs to article, and the fourth belongs to article. Now we can name it whatever we want. We are just marking the territory here, and it's just like defining the variable name. And the last belongs to ads. Okay, last belong to ads. Now in the third row is like a complete ditto copy of the second row, so we will just copy and paste that string here. Now in the last row, the first column belongs to navbar, so we can say that nav, and the rest belongs to footer, so we can say that footer, footer and footer. Okay, so footer and okay, footer. Now we have marked the territory. Actually, you can say that we have architect our web layout using using this. And now what we have to do is to name these items and give it one of those names. So now the property which we will use to give these items one of those names is grid area. Grid area, and the header, I am giving the name header to this header, and check what will be the answer. You can see that by automatically, the when I give this item the name header, it sees that I have to span from the column 1 till the column last, and it spans from the column 1 till the column last. Similarly, I will copy this and paste it here, and I will say that nav. We don't have to use string those inverted commas here. We just directly name those items. Okay, so now the navbar is stretched from the row 1 till the end row. That this is the article portion, and currently what I have to do is just I have to go and say that grid area and article. Similarly ads, and similarly footer. And if I go there, my web layout is ready. It's completely responsive. If our grid template area and columns we have defined in fractional units, so those fractional units will be responsive. If I change the width and height, it will not affect, because we have used the fraction part, and then we have used this syntax. The syntax is little weird, but when you grasp the concept, it will be very easy for you to create complex layouts using these grid template area. And actually when I use grid, most of the time I'm working with grid template area.